Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool back in Premier League action on Wednesday evening after the distraction that was the FA Cup fourth round fixture against Shrewsbury at the weekend and all the fallout that's come out of that. The only thing that anyone's been talking about over the last couple of days is the whole situation with Jurgen Klopp only playing the under-23s, him not coaching the side and putting Neil Critchley in charge instead because of the whole situation around the winter break and everything. With all the chat around that, it's kind of gone under the radar that Liverpool have another Premier League game coming up, and it's actually quite an important game in the grand scheme of things because all the way over the last month or month and a half or so, we've had to caveat the lead that Liverpool have over their rivals in the Premier League with they've got a game in hand as well. Sometimes they've even got two games in hand. This is now the game in hand. This is a chance for Liverpool to actually go level on games with their rivals and really establish an imperious, unassailable advantage at the top of the Premier League table. I mean, purely looking at it from a numbers perspective, if Liverpool win on Wednesday night, they go 19 points clear with no caveats, no, oh, City have played more or less games than us and stuff like that, or they've got more difficult games to come or anything like that. The fact of the matter will be, we will almost be 20 points clear of our nearest rivals in the league, and we will have 70 points on the board in January. That how many Liverpool sides have never even managed to get to 70 points in the league, full stop? How many have not even got close to that number? How many Liverpool sides have got to the end of the season 19 points clear of every other team in the league? It's just unfathomable how good this side is, and it's so important that we do the business on Wednesday night to really cement those numbers and start cementing this side's place in the history of Liverpool Football Club. And of course, like I said, there's been so much chat about the FA Cup, and it will be nice to actually get away from that. It feels like it's kind of put the brakes on the excitement for the season in the tiniest way possible, and I think that's one of the main reasons people take an issue with how Jurgen Klopp's handled it, because it almost feels like this season has been perfect up to this point, and this feels like it's put a blot on it. It's a little bit of bad press for Liverpool in what has otherwise been a year where everyone's just thought they are absolutely brilliant and infallible, and you can say absolutely nothing wrong about them. If you want me to do a video where I go more in depth into what I think about the whole situation with the FA Cup, then let me know down in the comments below. I'm more than happy to do it for you guys if you want to know my thoughts and if you want to just start a general discussion about why exactly Jurgen Klopp's done this and whether it's the right thing both for the players, for the management staff and for the club, given that we all obviously want us to win as many trophies as possible. But shoving that aside, all focus does turn to this game against West Ham, and like I said, it is a massive opportunity to just create a lead at the top of the Premier League table that, should it get to 19 points, it doesn't matter what stage you're in the season, it doesn't matter what games us or City have got between now and the end of the season, or Leicester, for example, that it looks like an impossible advantage for them to scale back, and it really would start to feel, if it doesn't already, like the Reds have got one hand on the Premier League trophy. So team news going into the game. Jurgen Klopp had his press conference this afternoon, and I'm going to start with a little bit of an apology because I made a little bit of a fool of myself in the pre-match video for the game against Shrewsbury. I know a lot of you have probably seen the tweet that's going around from Melissa Reddy from 2017 where she says that Sadio Mane is facing up to 6 weeks out with a hamstring injury. I saw that tweet, didn't really think much about it, just carried on with my life, thought that's a shame Sadio Mane is not available, and then went and told all of you guys in the pre-match video, sorry. That was a bit stupid on my part. As it turns out, Sadio Mane is not out for 6 weeks. So if you have, been avoiding all out of the news about him, and that was all you had to go on from the previous pre-match video, then you can rejoice. He is out for nowhere near that long. He is unfortunately not going to be available for this game because I think it's a muscle tear Jurgen Klopp described. So it's relatively serious. It's something that the club cannot take lightly. They've got to be careful with how they handle it and stuff like that. He won't be playing for this game against West Ham. He also won't be available for the Southampton game on Saturday afternoon. But after that, we have, of course, got the winter break, which isn't really a winter break anymore, but Klopp is trying his best to keep it as some sort of break for the first team players. Once we get back out of that, we've got, I think, an away game against Norwich on February 15th, and he will be back for that, which is fantastic news. I think while it is obviously going to be difficult to get on without Sadio Mane because he is such an important player, both in terms of his quality and in terms of what he offers to the Liverpool system. He is integral to the way we play going forward, and we will probably see a knock-on effect of his absence over the next couple of games. But like I said, given the lead we've got and the lead we will hopefully have after the next couple of games, we can probably get on without him just fine. I think the main thing is that he will be back for the bigger games as we get towards the end of the season, and of course those Champions League knockout ties against Atletico Madrid. Apart from Sadio Mane, you've also got Milner, who won't be available, Xherdan Shaqiri as well. Both of them are looking at coming back into the side sometime after the winter break, so we won't have to deal without them for much longer, but neither of them will be available for this game. And I think apart from that, we've pretty much got a full complement of players. Obviously, Fabinho continued his recovery with his first start since injury in the game against Shrewsbury. Same can be said for Joel Matip and Dejan Lovren. Both of them came back into the side. The less said about their performances, the better. But as it stands, they are now fit and available technically for Liverpool should Jurgen Klopp choose to call upon them in this game against West Ham. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up for the game at the London Stadium on Wednesday night, I think it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal. No surprises there. We don't really need to discuss it. Ahead of them, no surprises once again. I think it will be Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk. Neither Lovren or Matip did themselves any favours whatsoever in the game against Shrewsbury. And regardless of if they put in fantastic performances at the end of the day, coming back from injury, if they've started the match and played pretty much the full 90 minutes, I think Joel Matip came off, so maybe Jurgen Klopp is considering fielding him at some point over the next couple of games just to give one of Joe Gomez or Virgil van Dijk a rest. I think that's an entirely possible thing he might want to do, but given their performances and the fact they both played against Shrewsbury, it's unlikely any of them will play any part in this game whatsoever, barring any injury to the two first choice centre-backs, so it will almost definitely be Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk as your centre-back partners. Either side of them, again, no arguments here, it's Andrew Robertson and it's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold, unless there is, of course, some sort of injury. If there isn't, it makes absolutely no sense to not field those two. They are, of course, imperative to the way that Liverpool play, especially in these kind of games where away from home, the space can kind of open up for the fullbacks a little bit more than it does when we're at Anfield. I think now that teams are very, very aware of the threat that Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson offer, when they come to Anfield and they're likely to be a bit more defensive, I think they're more than happy to just crowd out those spaces in the wide areas and the central areas as well. Essentially, teams kind of play a back 6 or 7 to essentially nullify both the wingers, Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah, and then also the fullbacks as well, and make sure we've got no wide outlets whatsoever. But I think away from home, teams will tend to come out a little bit more. They can't really afford to sit off for the sake of just not disappointing all the fans that have paid to come out and see them. And as a result, while they do often crowd out players like Mane and Salah, they sometimes leave space open for people like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson. So I think they will be imperative, as they normally are, to getting Liverpool 3 points in this game, and I think both of them will almost definitely start. Onto the midfield, I don't think Fabinho is going to start this game, partially because he is still making that comeback, and I think if the game against Shrewsbury showed us anything, it's the fact that he is not entirely match fit, certainly not to the level that players like Henderson, LALLANA, Gini Van Alden, Oxlade-Chamberlain are. All of them are raring to go. They can give it 110% without a second thought, whereas Fabinho, not a judgment on his character, it's not like he's not trying, but it is going to take a little bit of time to heal. It was quite a lengthy injury layoff. He missed a very, very intense period of the season where he would have got a lot of games that would have kept him in a rhythm that he seems to have now lost. And against Shrewsbury, he just looked off the pace in a way that even the youngsters didn't. Curtis Jones, Pedro Chiravella, they looked sharper than him. So I think it is going to take a little bit longer, and I think maybe the club are looking at after the winter break as a time when Fabinho actually returns to the first team proper. And for now, it's just going to be more about substitute appearances and maybe starting if injuries facilitate it and stuff like that. So I don't think he's going to start this match. I think Jordan Henderson, been in fantastic form in the number 6. It makes no sense to drop him out of that position anyway. So I think he continues as the most defensive midfielder in the lineup. Either side of him, I think Gini Van Alden is another shoe-in, and I reckon he's going to go for Adam Lallana. I keep getting this one wrong. He keeps playing Oxlade-Chamberlain. He did it against Man United. I thought he was going to try and play Lallana to win the midfield battle. He did it against Wolves. I thought he was going to play Lallana because obviously away from home, Wolves were a good side. You want to be maybe a little bit more cagey than you normally would be. He played Oxlade-Chamberlain from the start again. I think maybe there's something about playing Ox because then you can bring on Lallana to try and shore things up towards the end of the game. That has had mixed results so far against Man United. The game kind of got away from us after Lallana came on, which is, not entirely his fault. Of course, he is one of only 11 players, but maybe that was something Jurgen Klopp tried to do and it just didn't quite pay off. I think against Wolves, we kind of flipped the tactic round and brought on Fabinho instead, and that was a lot more successful. So maybe we see something similar. But I think given Oxlade-Chamberlain's performances have just been fine over the last couple of games. He played both the first hour against both Man United and Wolves and didn't really shine, didn't really do too much to impress me or anyone else, to be honest. He just kind of kept things ticking over in the middle, and sometimes that's what Jurgen Klopp wants, but we know the standard of this team at the moment. We know the standard that Jurgen Klopp can demand from these players. So for me, it means that if you are turning in just 7 out of 10 performances and not really offering too much, then it's not like the manager's just going to bomb you out the side and say you're not good enough, but it makes sense for him to give other players opportunities, and I think Adam Lallana LALLANA has done more than enough over the last month, 6 weeks or so to warrant yet another chance in the midfield, and I think he will probably get it either for this game or for the Southampton game at the weekend. But I think the Southampton one, that makes more sense as a kind of an Oxlade-Chamberlain game, so I think he gets that one, and then Adam LALLANA will get this one, and he will complete that midfield three. And then up top, I think there's no surprises with two of them. It's almost definitely going to be Mo Salah and Firmino. Both of them pretty much got rests against Shrewsbury Town. We obviously bring them on towards the end of the game because Jurgen Klopp essentially throws the kitchen sink and says, we can lose this game or we can win this game. The last thing I want to get is a replay. We now know why he had that kind of attitude, but I think he threw them on just thinking, well, either they score or we go to attacking and Shrewsbury score, and either way we don't have to worry about that a second game at Anfield or anything like that. But they only really got 20 minutes out on the pitch. I don't think it's going to really take any sort of toll on them whatsoever, so both of them will start, and I think both of them will be absolutely fine in terms of match fitness for this game. The last forward, I reckon, is going to be Divock Origi, because I think as much as Jurgen Klopp is starting to prefer Minamino, we of course saw him in the game against Wolves, and Jurgen has been very, very impressed with him so far. It's been something of a baptism of fire for him, and I think it's a little bit harsh on the lad to just keep playing him, because it is obviously very difficult for him, and he's doing absolutely fine under the circumstances. The effort he's putting in is top notch. We can see why Jurgen Klopp likes him. We can see how he's going to ended up being moulded into the perfect Liverpool player. But for now, at least, it's not quite there. And I think that the pace of the games that he's being thrown into is starting to take its toll on him. And I think maybe the Southampton game would be fantastic for him. Maybe even if we want to change to a 4-2-3-1 to facilitate him coming in along with another front three as well. That would be absolutely fantastic. But I think in the meantime, for an away tie against a team that will probably be quite physical and energetic like West Ham, then I think it doesn't really make sense to play him, especially after he played most of the game against Shrewsbury on Sunday. So I think Divock Origi comes in from the left wing. There's also a bit less disruption there. Origi's been playing more as a natural left winger this season, whereas Minamino's been deployed down the centre. If you want to play Firmino, that's not really going to work. Minamino kind of has to sacrifice himself as a result, like we saw against Wolves, where he was getting pushed out wide quite a lot, and while he was creating space for other players, he wasn't really able to get into the game himself. So I think it makes logical sense to start Divock Origi as your left winger in this game, and then keep Firmino at centre mid, centre forward even, and of course have Mohamed Salah down that right hand side. So taking a little look at West Ham then, they have been in rather poor form since the arrival of David Moyes. I don't think anyone, West Ham fans or just neutrals, were particularly enthused with the return of David Moyes to the West Ham dugout. He was completely uninspiring the last time he was in there, and they essentially just sacked him because they were like, honestly, Dave, it's getting really boring. And I feel like something similar is probably going to happen at the end of this season. But in the meantime, he's been brought into to steady the ship at West Ham. He's kind of done that. I mean, they got a 4-0 win in his first game, which he didn't really take any credit for because he said, I've only just arrived. This is all down to the players. And since then, any results that he could take credit for, he probably doesn't want to. You know, they've got losses against Sheffield United, a draw at home to Everton, which we all know is an absolutely shocking result. A 4-1 loss away to Leicester was their last game in the league about a week ago. And then, of course, the FA Cup tie at the weekend, which was the first time they've been knocked out by a lower league side at home in the FA Cup in absolutely donkey's years. They were beaten by Slaven Bilic's West Brom, of all people, so a little bit of comedic irony there. But I think it's interesting to look at the 11 they used in that game, because it's not like they were fielding a second 11. They did a hybrid one where it was sort of half first team players that you'd expect to start in this game and then half fringe players, but they made 3 subs at half time, and all of them were quite attacking and quite, you know, full of intent as well. You had players like Mark Noble coming on and stuff like that. They were really trying to seize that game and turn it around. It didn't work out for them. They ended up losing 1-0, even though West Brom played the last 20 minutes with 10 men. So they'll obviously be very, very disappointed with that result, and they'll be hoping for some sort of recovery. But I think given how many players had to go the distance in that match, they could be a little bit tired, especially given how few Liverpool first teamers we used in the FA Cup game at the weekend. And also, just looking at the way they played against Leicester in the league as well, they look like the kind of side where when they're under the cosh, there's just no inspiration, there's no leaders out on the pitch, and when things start to go wrong, they just completely fall apart. And it was quite interesting. They do get back into that game. They're quite fortunate to win a penalty. You know, it's not really won through any clear goal scoring chance. It's a foul in the box, definitely, but they just kind of get given a lifeline by Leicester. After that, they have a good 5 minutes. They create chances. They seem like a fair weather team. When things start to go well, they give it their all, but when things go wrong, they just seem to lose focus. Defensively, they're all over the shop, and even when they pack the box, and this is what gives me a lot of hope and optimism going into this game, even when they do pack the box and try and park the bus, the players aren't in the right places. They're still leaving spaces open. Leicester exploited that brilliantly, especially with players arriving late or coming in from wide areas. And that's why I think people like Robertson and Alexander-Arnold are going to be so crucial, because the West Ham defence looked like they'd end up being so preoccupied with Salah, Firmino, Origi, players like that they just forget about the fullbacks and leave the space open for them. And that would obviously be a huge bonus for Liverpool. And that's why I think our goals are going to come from there. I mean, they look like a very beatable team. And I think in terms of fitness news, there is some negative news for Liverpool. They've just got Antonio back, and we know how much he loves a goal against us. He contributed to the derailment of our Premier League title challenge last season, getting the equaliser at the London Stadium in one of the few times last season that we actually dropped points. They also potentially have Fabianski back, and that is one to keep an eye out for, because they've had their goalie troubles so far this season. I think since they've re-signed Darren Randolph, it's not really as big a problem. He's a lot better than some of the backup goalies they've had so far this season. I mean, God knows why they got rid of Adrian, but Darren Randolph has been a perfectly decent deputy. If they do bring back Fabianski, that will be annoying, because we know how good he can be in these types of games. He's the kind of goalie who thrives in a match where he's got to make 10 saves and something like that, and he's kept busy. So that could obviously cause a problem for Liverpool. But looking at the way West Ham have set up and looking at that Leicester game as a blueprint, because I obviously think there's going to be similar dynamics there. Obviously, Leicester are a very good side, streets ahead of West Ham in terms of quality, and at times they just tore their defence apart like it was absolutely nothing. And I think if Liverpool bring their A game to this match, we'll rip West Ham to shreds. Obviously, there is the issue that if we show up like we did at the London Stadium last season, where we didn't bring our A game, we were very much off it. It was just lethargic. There didn't seem to be the same amount of ideas. There didn't seem the same desperate desire to win. And I think that's another worry for us as fans as we get closer to the end of the season, and it looks more and more like the ribbon's already on the trophy. How do you keep motivating those players? I think Jurgen Klopp, of all people, is probably the only man on the planet who could keep these players going and giving 110% and willing to lay down their lives to get those kind of last minute winners that they got, like the last time out against Wolves at Molineux. So I think the players will still give 110% and stuff like that, but obviously I think West Ham will give it an absolute go. I don't think it's going to be an easy game, but I do think we'll get the win. I reckon it'll be 2-0, 3-1, something like that. Hopefully not the most stressful game in the world, because I think after the game against Wolves and the match against Shrewsbury Town, we could all use a relaxing 90 minutes where, as Jurgen Klopp always says, we can forget about our problems and just enjoy the football. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LSU Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon with the post-match content after we've hopefully beaten West Ham. Until then, bye for now.